Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Developer Team. My name is Jonathan Cottrell. My goal on this show is to help driven developers like you find clarity, perspective, and purpose in their careers. In today's episode, I want to talk a little bit about self-assessment and skills, because so much of your career is about figuring out what you are uniquely good at. And this evaluation, this assessment, this determination of what you're good at is not as simple as a single list. Part of the difficulty here is that we're not just talking about figuring out what you're good at now. We're not talking about figuring out what you've done that you were good at before. And we're not just talking about what might you be good at in the future. It's all of those things all put together. And we want to determine this through the lens of what you are energized by. So there's another aspect to this evaluation that's not as simple as what are you capable of, what can you do well, because we want to look at a sustainable long-term picture of what keeps you engaged, what you actually care about doing. This is the purpose part of the discussion for you. Right? So the truth is that, if you have never done an exercise like this, then I'm excited, especially for you, because this exercise, what we're going to do today, is going to give you some of the vocabulary that you'll use. It may give you vocabulary if you decide to go into management, for example, to help your reports as well, to help them figure out the same kinds of questions they may have in their career. A lot of the time, what we are trying to figure out with the kinds of assessments, for example, if you ever have done something like StrengthsFinder, or a less popular one, but is growing in popularity, is Working Genius. It's a Pat Lencioni book called Working Genius. There's a lot of unscientific ones out there. There's a lot that are more scientific. There's all of these kinds of things, these products that you can go buy and assessments you can take, and the disc profile. All this stuff is trying to paint a picture to help you determine what you can do, and what you can do well with the kind of least input. Right? The least amount of energy and effort on your part. And I want to give you a simplified version of this. All right. This is not going to be a list of questions that asks you, what is your first thought when you wake up, and try to extrapolate from that what your career should look like. Those, in my opinion, are kind of fraught with a lot of potential problems. They may lead you down pathways that you don't even really care about going down. All right. So take all of those assessments with a grain of salt. There are some that are better than others, and I personally enjoy some of the insights I've gained from StrengthsFinder, for example. All right, the Clifton Strengths. If you go and look at that, it may give you some angle on this, but to translate those things into something actual, useful, practical, is a little bit harder to do. Right, it's a little bit harder to just go straight from that list of strengths into something that you could put on a resume or go and act on at work. All right, so let's look at a slightly different kind of tool for this. And this is a classic management tool. It's called the 9 block. All right, the 9 block. I'm not going to go into excruciating detail and listing all 9 parts of this exercise, but imagine that it's on the x-axis and the y-axis. You have this kind of map, right? And that if you were to draw like a tic-tac-toe box, that would have 9 blocks in it. So for each x and y, you might have a low, medium, and high to get to your 9 distinct boxes, right? And so if you were to imagine, the top left box on the x-axis might be low, but it might be high on the y-axis, right? That's the visual that you're kind of looking at with the 9 block. And so on the x-axis is one of these two. Let's just pick one. On the x-axis is performance, right? You could consider this your current skill, your current ability. How well are you doing in this particular thing, right? So, you can imagine that, if you are extraordinarily good at something, let's say that delivering code to production. We're going to pick a really easy one, right? That you're very good at that, right? And you're excelling at that. You're, maybe a level or two above where your job says you should be, right? You're doing really well at this. Then you're on your x-axis. You may have, all the way to the right. You're a high performer, right? And now on the y-axis, we're going to talk about potential, right? Potential for going to the next level. So as we already mentioned, you're outperforming maybe all of your peers. But let's imagine that your manager does this 9 block and they evaluate you as you kind of have topped out here, right? You're not necessarily going to stall out completely, but we don't see you really, expanding drastically beyond where you are right now. Then you might get a medium. You might put that y-axis at the medium level for potential. All right, so on the 9 block, you would be all the way over to the right and 1 up. All right, so that's the visual you can imagine here. Now, this visual is useful. Sometimes, it's kind of used in maybe less than useful ways, right? So, trying to put a person, all of their skills and everything all together, a single dot on this matrix, I think that could lead you down some bad pathways as a manager. But if you're trying to evaluate specific skills or specific areas of skill, you could imagine like an area of skill might be, system design, right? That might be something that you, as an engineer, you might practice system design. Trying to evaluate where on the 9 block should you be placed for system design may be a useful exercise for you, right? Because as you go through this list of skills that skill areas, domains that make up parts of your career, you may recognize some new insights, through this 9 block exercise. Okay, so that's kind of the traditional version of the 9 block, but I want to add some more nuance to this because what it could lead you to do is list out 1 million skills, right? Or let's just say 30, 40 skills, and try to place yourself on the 9 block for all of those skills and try to do the rest of this exercise with that many. The truth is that if you're looking at what you're truly good at, what people are going to know you for, what you really enjoy doing, the things that you want to kind of make the keystone of your career, what kind of value you bring to the table, right? That others can recognize, that energizes you, that has an extraordinary impact on the company that you work for, on the domain, on the industry. How long is that list really going to be? And the truth of this kind of exercise is that there's a missing component if you just did the 9 block for all of your skills. And the missing component is a third dimension of energy. All right, so the amount of energy that you're putting into each of these skills. And what I mean by energy in this frame is not the energy that you get from it, right? It's much more like the cost to you. So one way that you could practice this is to limit the number of skills that you're allowed to put onto the 9 block, right? So imagine that you actually draw out the tic-tac-toe, boxes, and you give yourself, a handful of coins, right? Maybe even make them different sizes. So you can pick the top one, for example. You have a quarter for the top one and a dime, for the next one, etc. And the idea here is to reckon with the fact that you can't practice or develop an endless number of skills. It wouldn't even necessarily be a great idea to do that from a career development perspective, because people don't hire you for 30 skills. They hire you for a compelling, much smaller subset of those, right? So if you're looking at let's play out an example of this. If you did a 9 block and you're looking at a list of skills that you've placed down, and you have one skill. Let's say, again, we'll go back to systems design. Let's say that you're performing kind of medium, right? This is something you're still learning. You're doing decently well, but you believe that you have a high aptitude here. You have high potential, right? So you're 1 over and all the way up at the top for potential. And so, you're not really having to do a lot for this. You're kind of absorbing, this information from other people. It's not really difficult for you. It's not taking a lot of your energy. Okay. So this third dimension, however you might want to write this out. Of course, we can't. It's harder to do these exercises in true 3 dimensions. But you could write next to that dot on your matrix that you've built. You could write maybe a 1 to 5, right? Where 5 is the maximum energy. This is taking a lot from me, and 1 is I'm kind of on autopilot for this. And what you may recognize is that you have a very high potential thing that you're maybe you're on the lower side of performance, but you're not putting a lot of energy into it, right? So hopefully, if you're listening closely here, you can recognize that's an opportunity, right? Because you have a high potential, and you're not necessarily putting a lot towards it. So if you were to put more towards it, then perhaps that potential would be realized sooner. You would move, from lower performance or medium performance, maybe up to high performance. So this is a way to kind of clear log jams. It's a way to recognize that, some opportunities that you may have in your skill set. Of course, there's other questions to answer, like, does the company value that particular thing, right? So, if you have a high potential in that skill set, the company doesn't value it, then are you actually kind of fit for the role that you're in? It's another question you may want to ask at that point. Because if you have a high potential, if you're really well kind of established, you're excited about that particular skill, but you're not able to practice it, it's not really something that is needed for your role, then that potential ends up being kind of lost, right? It's not completely lost, but it's harder for you to leverage this thing that you have high potential in, that you have a lot of energy for, if it's not valued, right? It's not going to have a leverage, positive leverage on your career. But the best case scenarios, right? The best case scenarios is there's 2 kind of good scenarios you can find yourself in. One where you have a lower performance, but a high potential and a low energy score, right? So in other words, you're not putting a lot into it, but you feel like it's something that you can do well, right? And there's a lot of ways that you can evaluate that. Right now, we're just kind of going on, kind of a non-scientific self-evaluation. How well do you think you can pick up on this skill? Are you kind of naturally predisposed to doing that thing? When you've put some energy into it, do you get positive feedback? Those are the kinds of things that we're using for that particular evaluation. So that's an opportunity flag, right? If you are currently not really putting a lot into it, but when you do put energy into it, you see like a lot of positive gain, right? You see a lot of growth, or you get a lot of positive feedback. Then there's a high potential for improvement there, right? There's a high potential for improvement with the least input, right? So that's situation number 1. Situation number 2 is if you have an area, and we're going to add a 4th dimension here, so stick with me for a second. If you have an area where you currently are a medium performer, maybe a low performer, or even if you are a high performer, this may still apply, okay? But it's taking a lot of energy. You don't have a lot of aptitude potential in that area. In other words, the more energy you add, it feels like you're kind of hitting a wall. You're not really growing any in that way, in that particular area. Maybe you're not interested in it, but it's the potential for you to grow towards that thing is really low, right? You're not likely to get significantly better at it. And then the fourth dimension, this is an important one for this particular evaluation, is it's a low risk to drop, okay? If you were to look at all your dots, right? Again, we only need to do 3 or 4, so adding an energy and a risk to these dots is probably not that hard. Just say a 1 to 5 risk, right? Where 5 is I absolutely cannot let this go. I must have this skill. I can't drop it. Maybe it's the critical thing that that you're very good at, that people rely on you for, right? If you're a software engineer, probably one of your 5 risk level skills is delivery of software, right? It's very unlikely that you can just drop that skill and get by and like continue to succeed in your career, because it is kind of a fundamental skill to have, right? So if you're looking at your skills though, and you recognize this kind of like hitting a wall type skill, right? It matches that profile where you're really putting a lot of energy into it, but your performance is not improving really that much. You don't expect it to. You're not really interested or excited in that thing. You're just kind of hitting a wall, right? And hopefully intuitively this makes sense. If you have like a 2 or 3 risk score on that, especially if you have a 1, but a 2 or 3 even, what would happen if you were to redirect that energy, right? Redirect what you're spending on this thing that you keep hitting a wall on towards something that has higher potential. So this is the counterintuitive part of this, and what you need to talk to your manager about. You need to talk to, whoever is going to help you kind of carve out this path, right? Talk to peers about it as well. The counterintuitive thing is that you may be a medium to high performer in that area, right? You may be doing something that you're pretty good at, actually, but you're not going to get much better at it. The risk of dropping it is pretty low, and you have something else you could be doing that you do have a high potential in, right? That currently you're a lower performer in. So the counterintuitive part is that you're dropping something that traditionally you would say that you're good at it. You're dropping that in order to do something that you're not as good at. This evaluation is something you have to be careful with, right? Because the bet that you're making is that the value that you get out of doing the thing that you have a high potential to do, right? To the high growth potential in, is going to exceed whatever the marginal value is in the thing that you are already doing well, you have a high performance in, and that the risks are not going to catch up to you. So this is a skill management, skill portfolio thing, right? The reason why we're doing this as a part of the Career Growth Accelerator series is because there's probably a list of skills that you can't drop. Let's set those aside. Let's not even talk about it. You don't even need to put them on your 9 block, right? There's another list of skills that you wish you could do, that are invigorating, exciting to you, that you kind of connect to naturally, that you have a high potential for. And then there's kind of an overlap there, right? The kind of middle skills where you are already doing this thing, and you need to evaluate whether you can drop it, right? Evaluate whether this high energy skill, the thing that's taking a lot from you, that you're not getting much better at, maybe you're pretty good at it. Could you drop it? Could you move to another skill? Why does all this matter for the Career Growth Accelerator? Because how you spend your time and your growth potential, right? Your growth potential, if you are stalled out, it's likely that the thing that you are banging your head against the wall trying to improve at, that you need to change something, right? And this is, you're essentially looking at a map and trying to decide which of these things should I change, right? You're looking at your 9 block and you're trying to say, this is the thing that I could adjust, that I could change, that I could shift. Maybe I need to put more energy into this thing, right? Maybe I should swap this thing out for another thing. This, and you don't have to look at these as like traditional skills that you put on your resume, okay? The skill here may be something as simple as spending time developing relationships with your peers. It may be something like improving your communication skills, your public speaking skills. There could be a whole list of things that fit on this 9 block, right? We're not gonna say that you can have 30 or 40 here, but if you're getting more granular, then you could have more, right? Because improving your public speaking skills is not necessarily going to be a keystone skill in your career per se. So you might see 10 or 15 on this exercise. If you can pick skills that you have high potential, right, and then go and invest 4 or 5 level energy into them and make the trade-offs that are necessary to do that. Don't delude yourself into believing that you can just do this on top of everything that you already do, right? This is kind of a key point that I want to make here. You must do this trade-off. If you have stalled out, it's very likely that you have to do a trade-off. You can't simply pick something up new, something that you're going to invest a lot in. That's probably not going to work, right? Instead, you're going to look at something that you're already investing in. Can you reduce that investment? What is the risk associated with that? Is there potential in that other thing that I need to protect, that I need to still tap into? Have I really been investing in those things? Those are the kinds of questions you need to ask yourself. And this isn't a simple step-by-step process, right? This is a, this model is helpful, but it's not any kind of special magic. Really, this is a way to prioritize the things that are most likely to help break the logjam. The only real counterintuitive thing that you may not have encountered before is the idea of switching out something that you're good at for something that you're not good at, right? Or switching out something that you're good at for another thing that you're good at, but the other thing is more valuable. It's giving you more, positive value in your career or positive personal value. There are ways that you can kind of adjust this. There's a list of activities and skills that you're developing and strengths that you're focused on to fit your career in a more kind of a more advantageous way, right? Again, we're not getting into how you determine your potential or your current performance level. Those are things that are kind of left up as exercises for you. Instead, the model is what I want you to think about. Right? The model, the idea that your current performance is not static, right? That potential matters. That's the first insight from the 9 block, that your past performance doesn't necessarily dictate your current performance. You could be rusty, right? Like it's a dynamic picture. And so when your manager is looking at, what are the kind of skill sets of my reports, I'm not just looking at their current position. I'm not just looking at the last quarter of their performance. I'm also looking at where are they headed? Where are they going? Right? What's next for them? Are they growing, and in what ways? Right? If you're not thinking about that, then you should be the person who's thinking the most about your own growth. If your manager is thinking more about your growth than you are, today is the day to fix that, right? So do the 9 block, look at those dimensions of current performance level, potential, that's going to place you on the 9 block, right? And then the other 2 aspects were your energy level, the energy required, right? The 1 to 5. And then the final aspect is the risk. The risk or criticality may be another way to think about it. If this is a high risk thing to drop, then it's a 5, right? If it's a very low risk thing, nobody would even know that you stopped doing it, then it's a 1. All right. So if you were to kind of map out this picture, and we've already talked about a couple of these options, there are ways to identify right away things that you can just drop off with almost no issue, right? If you are low potential, low performance, and low risk, for example, you should take that off of your 9 block and never do it again, probably, right? So there's insights that you can gain in these categories on this 9 block that, there's kind of groupings of categories that you should pay a lot of attention to. That one is a simple example. Another simple example might be your bread and butter skills. These are things that are not necessarily going to, make or break your career, but they are helpful as like a fallback for when you're in the midst of a project, right? And it's a way to show reliability, right? These are skills that are kind of, everything's down the middle, right? So your energy level is kind of like, I put some energy towards that. The risk level is right down the middle. So like it's kind of risky, but wouldn't totally destroy your career. You probably want to consider keeping it though. So, risk is straight down the middle. Your performance is straight down the middle. Another engineer could do this, right? Somebody else could do it. Some things that might fit into this category is things like code review of the average, MR, PR, right? Another engineer could do that. It's something that's important for you to do, most likely. Any given review may be helpful to the other engineer. It may be important to catch, some kind of security flaw, but you're unlikely to key your entire career on that kind of bread and butter skill. It just comes along with the territory of the job. So those are not the kinds of skills that you would say, oh, I'm just going to go and pour a bunch more energy into that, right? That's the kind of insight that you can get out of this 9 block. Hopefully this is helpful. And really, there's not any one kind of light bulb moment necessarily that you'll get out of this. Some people might, but most of the time, this is just getting to know your own skill sets better and trying to spend your time and your energy in more fruitful ways, right? Ways that are going to pay you back either in your personal satisfaction or in the value that you generate for your role. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of Developer D. If you missed out on the first couple of episodes of the Career Growth Accelerator series, go back and listen to those. You can watch them on YouTube now. We're improving our YouTube setup. Hopefully, that is a helpful outlet for you all to find episodes of Developer T on, and we're going to continue investing in that channel. If you enjoyed this episode, leave a rating and review. You can also comment on it in YouTube. This is probably one of the best ways to help the show grow is by subscribing in YouTube, subscribing in whatever podcasting app you use, making sure that you still have that kind of auto download setting on. Apple has changed some things about that, and that's kind of changed the podcasting landscape, and the sponsorship landscape. So we're trying to kind of play catch up with some of those things. So making sure that you have your automatic downloads set, not just this podcast, but other podcasts, is going to help them out a ton. Thank you so much for listening. And until next time, enjoy your tea.